What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to Fudge Muppet. I'm Scott, and today we're going to talk about why men suck. Now, this isn't some feminist or political piece. We are talking about the race of men, including their women, and why they suck from the Thalmor perspective. It's very easy to just look at the Thalmor as a bunch of Nazi-like evil oppressors, but as we all know, there is always more to the story. Everyone is the hero of their own story, and it is highly unlikely that Thalmor were just like, yay, I want to be the villain, yeah, bad guy stuff. No, there's actually an interesting perspective from the Thalmor and the High Elves in general, which helps understand their motivations, especially those against the worship of Talos. Remember, this isn't a video justifying their perspective, but simply trying to understand it. First, let's look at the fundamental differences between men and mer. Generally speaking, elves, particularly the Altmer, are in fact the genetically superior race. They have incredibly long lifespans, some living well over 1,000 years old compared to a mere century at best for most humans. This in itself is incredibly useful to a society. There is that saying that practice makes perfect, and elves have hundreds of years to perfect their crafts. Take a high elven swordsman who has had 500 years to practice versus a Nord who has had a mere 30 years of practice by comparison. Who do you think is most likely to win? Most of the most famous and powerful wizards have also been elves, examples such as Vanus Galerian, Manamako, and Divaith Fear. One contributing factor is the fact that they have hundreds of years to perfect their studies and acquire vast knowledge. This is simply a luxury men cannot afford. They also have an innate magical talent which grants them a large advantage over the many human races. The High Elves themselves practice eugenics, which involves selective breeding so that only the best traits are passed on to the next generation. Quite simply, it's easy to factually justify the elven superiority over man because in most areas they are simply better, and it's because of this the Thalmor consider themselves the true rulers of Tamriel. Now imagine being a High Elf at the end of the Second Era, chilling in the Somerset Isles doing whatever High Elves do all day. Tiber Septim is off creating his empire, conquering Tamriel, and is even willing to just let the Aldmeri Dominion govern themselves while in an alliance, as there's no way he'd be able to conquer the elves through normal means. That is, until he's gifted the Numidium, the great brass god, basically Dwemer Optimus Prime, a giant unstoppable creation. Tiber Septim, a man, uses this to absolutely decimate the Somerset Isles, killing thousands and demanding they bow to him and accept his rule, a man's rule over elves. From the High Elves' perspective, this is essentially a prehistoric Neanderthal nuking the USA and saying, I'll nuke the rest of you too if you don't surrender to my rule. Through unconventional means, they were forced to surrender themselves to what they consider their lesser, and in many ways this is true and has been proven to be true throughout history. The race of men can be viewed as childish, constantly warring and fighting, if not against the elves, then against themselves. Breton kingdoms constantly fight petty wars amongst each other, Nords constantly raiding and finding glory in the deaths of others. Redguards came to Tamriel in one of the most devastating invasions, slaughtering pretty much all that inhabited Hammerfell. Tiber Septim, according to alternative sources, is a power-hungry murderer who killed allies in his quest of ambition. They are often genocidal invaders, often slaughtering and conquering. You can really see how the elves truly look down on these men as savages, too short-lived and short-sighted to acquire the wisdom of the elvish people. Of course, this is not to say the elves are exempt from their episodes of barbarity and violence, but you can understand the elven viewpoint. In addition, it is elves that have contributed so much to modern society and technology, they feel as if it is their right to rule. The Dwemer, the Aelids, the Sigic Order, just as examples, but all these societies of incredibly magical and cultural sophistication compared to the early Needs or Nords, who basically killed a lot of elves. In all fairness, the Needs were fighting the oppression of the Aelids and the Nords were taking revenge for the Night of Tears, but you can see how their contributions to society pale in comparison. So imagine being a High Elf witnessing all this. From their point of view, essentially a tyrant has come, committed mass murder against your people, and demand you fall under his rule, and you have to accept. Tiber Septim rules on and then dies. His dynasty lives on, generations of humans continue, and this mass murderer is considered a god, and in fact is revered as the ninth divine in the official pantheon of the empire that you are now forcibly a part of. You see, because of an Altmer's long lifespan, there would be many who witnessed their conquering at the hands of Tiber Septim, lived through his glorification as a god throughout the 3rd and 4th era, and still lives today. You'd only have to be around 700 years old, which isn't far-fetched for an elf. You witnessed firsthand the destruction and horror of Tiber Septim, but then lived to see his war crimes left unpunished, and in fact see him revered by generations of foolish men as a god and hero to the empire which you are now a part of. You are forced to treat what you view as a genocidal Neanderthal as a god, worthy of the same respect as the ancient Adric spirits. That is blasphemy to most high elves. You can easily see how, as a high elf, you would be at the very least frustrated by this predicament. Now come the 171st year of the Fourth Era, and the Thalmor, the leading governmental body of the Aldmeri Dominion, start the Great War, which ends in the White Gold Concordat abolishing the worship of what they view as a false god and glorified murderer of elves. Beyond this simple what they would view as justice, there is a much deeper plot behind the eradication of Talos. You see, the gods of the Elder Scrolls universe attain their level of power through their worship. The more an entity is worshipped, usually the more powerful they become. The Thalmor essentially want to eradicate the worship of Talos, destroy the idea of him so that he will be erased, his worship gone. At the very least, they hope to leave Talos powerless as an act of revenge, erased from memory with no worshippers to fuel his influence over the world. This is what the Thalmor perceive as justice. It puts them in an odd moral predicament, though. It was Tiber Septim and the men of generations ago who wronged the elves of the Somerset Isles. The current generations of men are somewhat innocent of these crimes, but Talos is not, and the only way they can exact their revenge is by removing his worship, which means harming innocent generations of men and pursuing witch hunts against Talos worshippers. All in all, this is why the Thalmor think men suck. This video is not justification for the Thalmor's actions, but you can see the real reasons behind what they do, the philosophical reasoning behind their movement. It's an interesting predicament, one that I hope Bethesda continues to explore in future Elder Scrolls games. What do you think about the Thalmor? Has this video made you reconsider your views on them, or at least understand them better than just the evil baddie elves who come to ruin men's days? Leave a like and comment below, get some discussion going. I'm Scott from Fudge Muppet, and I'll be back to nerd out with you again very soon.